everybody, and welcome to another edition of HCS Matters. I'm John Wright, Director of Public Relations for Hardin County Schools. We're hanging out today in the criminal justice pathway. It's located at John Hardin High School, and we're visiting with the criminal justice instructor, Miss Nikki Coleman, who's also, if you've heard her name, she also happens to be the girls basketball coach at John Hardin High School. And Coach Coleman, this is this pathway. This is a second year of existence or third year of existence, and you have seen. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of what the pathway is about, but you have seen this thing explode over the last 3 years.
Absolutely. So the first year, I don't know that kids knew about the pathway or what to expect about it.
Sure.
And so I think that we added it a little bit late, so that it wasn't on when they were doing their scheduling that year.
Right.
But since then, I think we had 400 sign up the next year, and then we had well over 600 sign up the following year.
Wow, that's tremendous. So just talk about, when you say criminal justice, that tells me law enforcement, and I know there's a simulation screen behind us, and so that tells me that we're going to have some fun, but there's also a lot of learning here. So let's, I guess, start at the beginning and take me through the capstone pieces of this course.
So they all start with Intro to Criminal Justice, and really we talk about the court system because the other classes are corrections, which is jails and prisons, and then law enforcement is the other two specialized, and then criminal investigations, which everyone loves. But so in Intro we learn the basics, like this is from the time of arrest to the time of release. And then we really talk about what goes on in the court system. And then law enforcement, we get into what people see. A lot of it is expelling some of the myths that are out there. What you see on TV versus what is reality. We get to talk about real life things that go on. I'm fortunate that I get students from all sides of the county, so they have different viewpoints, and we come together in one classroom, and they're able to express those and then learn from one another. So it's a pretty incredible situation.
Yeah. So we going off basically, this is the same model that we do at the Early College and Career Center, except they're out of room. So they have some rooms here at John Hardin High School, and so that is why you're here. But just talk about. You said, being from 3 different spots in the county, our county is so diverse geographically, and so talk about some of those discussions and how some of those discussions play out. Having three different sets of folks in here. Right.
So we talk about the Second Amendment a lot because it's huge in the media. What does it look like? Why, some people want guns banned, but some people are like, listen, we hunt with them and it's normal. Different viewpoints on, what's important in their community, even though we're still in the same county, but the community's needs and makeups are so different. The North End has more from Fort Knox, which brings another element in. Because they're from all over the country. So, they get to see things and bring that element in. But it's, I think that at the end of the day, they learn to respect one another and respect that there are other opinions out there. And even we don't have to agree, we still know that they're there.
So, and then that respect, that kind of teaching them to be level-headed, calm, or whatever, that probably feeds into that law enforcement piece, right? That law enforcement course.
Absolutely, because we talk about, we all have bias. It's natural, but understanding your community that you work in, and understanding their needs versus what your needs are, and putting aside those bias, and that people aren't always going to see the world the way that you do, and you have to have that empathy for them when you respond to things.
What is there a mindset when students enter the course versus when they leave the pathway or leave a course?
It's really interesting because I do ask my seniors always, what's one thing that, I should know or whatever. And they said, everybody should take this because these are our rights as people. And it's, they take their government classes and stuff like that, but we dive deep into, my protection against the government, even though I'm, pro law enforcement and stuff like that. But, what are my rights when I'm being searched? What are my rights when I talk to law enforcement? And so they're like, these are things that nobody would have told us. And those dealing with the court system as well, they didn't know that. So they feel like they're glad that they took it, whether they go into law enforcement, whether they go into criminal justice, but they're happy that they took it because they have that understanding.
So when students leave here, what are some next steps for them? What are you, and it being the third year, what are some success stories that you've heard, or some pathways that some students have taken because of this course or this pathway?
One of my students last year, she went to U of L. She did a almost like an internship with LMPD. And she was really excited to reach out to me and explain to me, hey, I did all this stuff. It was really exciting. My first year, one of my first year seniors, she's WKU, and she is working with criminals. They're like a psychologist person. So she's so excited, but she did say, she's like, these first classes that I'm taking, she's like, I knew everything because we learned it here. So she, it was an ease for her to go into her freshman year.
So if I'm looking at any aspect or thinking about any aspect of law enforcement, whether that be law, it's pre-law,
Correct.
Whether that be going into police force, or we all watch those CSI shows and
Absolutely.
things like that. So if I'm thinking about any of that pathway is really for me, and this pathway is for me.
Absolutely, and KSP came out yesterday. They have an apprenticeship program that they're going to take them because my students can't become law enforcement officers until they're 21, so there's that gap. And for some of them, what do I do with that gap time? Some of them don't like college, and it's not mandated. So KSP's come up with an apprenticeship program that they will take them and train them in those 2 years and get them involved in the program. So I thought that was really a good program for kids that want to do that. But everybody comes into the program wanting to be
a cop.
Well, CSI. They want to go CSI.
Right. We watch too much TV.
Right.
So you touched on this, but your partnerships with law enforcement are critical to the success of this, right?
Absolutely. Normally have local police departments come in, talk on different things. It's not necessarily, hey, come be a police officer, but we have Sergeant Beasley that comes in and talks about use of force, because he was up there during the Breonna Taylor riots, and he really gives a different perspective from what you saw on TV.
Sure.
So.
And then I know when we first started this pathway, or in the conversations about this pathway, Sheriff Ward and KSP were begging us to do this because they need people. I mean, they need people to do what you're training them to do.
Right, and we talk about it. We talk about the pros and cons, and I don't know that anyone not a lot of people come in and say that they want to be a police officer, but once we get into law enforcement, some are like, hey, that's kind of cool, and there's more to it than, again, what you see on TV, and that's something that they might want to do, whether it's work the road or behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. You have the simulation screen is behind us, behind our friends here. We'll talk about them in a second. But that simulation screen, I've been in here when you've used that. Talk about what you do with this simulation program.
First of all, we do gun familiarization, because not everybody wants to or has handled a weapon. I don't require everybody to shoot, but we do it for target practice and whatnot. But
with a not a real gun.
Not a real gun. It's a laser.
Right.
It feels like a real gun, but no real bullets.
Right.
And then we have on there that real life scenarios where it's kind of like a movie-ish, but I control if my student goes through the steps of use of force, and if they talk them down, I can say, hey, they comply. They have to make situations in the scenario where they have to decide, are they going to shoot or not shoot? What are they reaching for? Do they have a weapon? Are they just reaching for a phone? So they have to use their judgment. So even for those students that don't use it, it gives everybody a perspective of what law enforcement officers have to entail when they go to a call. And I've had students, they're like, oh my gosh, that was so quick. Yeah, it's real quick in real life, in a safe environment here, but this is when you see these things on TV, you can sit back and say, oh, I would have done, they should have did this, but reality is that you're not in that situation.
That's exactly right. So I would imagine, and you touched on it, but I would imagine that this opens up a whole lot of new avenues for their thinking, after they go through the simulation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when talk about some of the the boring stuff, the classwork that you get into. I mean, I'm not even sure you have
None
a
of
textbook.
it is boring.
I know. I apologize. I shouldn't have used that vernacular. I shouldn't have used that terminology. But there's probably not a lot of sit and get. Is when we were in school, we sat and took notes. There's probably not a whole lot of that in this pathway. I imagine there's some, but not a great deal.
Well, we have to get the vocabulary down,
Right.
and stuff like that. But I like to throw out situations and get them thinking, and then them create class discussion, and then go against each other. So it, I don't have textbook. I have textbooks, but I'm piecemealing it together because there's not a set curriculum. I mean, we have standards and stuff like that, but it's changing all the time too. So there is some times that it,
Sure. So talk about that. I mean, as laws evolve, Kentucky law is changing. It changes every spring when the legislature meets. So as state and national law changes and local laws as they change, you have to stay on top of that.
Right. And so and I we'll bring them in and we'll talk about the case that got them to change, or what created this, and why did it change, and sometimes is it for the better, or is it not, or do you think it's not for the better, or not for the better, and stuff like that. But they one thing I do in intro, and all my other students are glad that we don't continue it, but is current events. So every week they have to do a local, national, and state current event that has to do with either the courts, corrections, or law enforcement. Okay. And then they have to decide if it was a good reflection or a bad reflection, just to keep them in tune of what's going on in the world, because they don't watch the news. This generation does not keep up with that stuff.
That's right. It's all here.
Correct.
Right. So do they talk about? Do they see the bias that's out there? I mean, especially in social media and things like that. Do they realize and talk about those biases?
Oh, absolutely. And so we have some students that like to use certain news stations, and then some like to use the opposite. And so it brings on a good discussion. I do encourage them, hey, just because you saw that in one news station, go to another one and see what their take is on it, because it might be a little bit different.
The simulation, the simulation portion, you talked about how it brings real life scenarios. I mean, is there a sense of, I guess, a kind of sense of relief when they realize, look, I don't have to use force on this person because they did back down? I mean, can you see that relief on those kids' faces when they realize I can work this out?
Well, some turn, they're like, I didn't shoot him. I didn't have to shoot anyone. I'm like, you don't
Right.
have to shoot anyone. And that's not every call that these law enforcement officers go to. They don't have to shoot someone. And the majority of law enforcement officers don't shoot people.
Right.
I mean, but that's not what you see on TV.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. The program itself, what are some things that you're hearing back? And I know we talked about a couple of your alums, but some reviews, I guess, that you've maybe gotten some from some folks, or what they say about this course after they finish. Look, I realized that this is a totally different deal than I thought it was going to be.
Some people have, just like with the other pathways at EC3, like they try it and that's not for them. Generally, those students tend to stay in this pathway and finish it. But I know that they're not going to go in the criminal justice system,
Right.
or not system, but field, and that's okay too. So
Right.
But it gives them a better understanding.
Sure. Are there certifications that a student can earn by being in the criminal justice pathway?
We do we're going to do an end of pathway test. It's a NOCD test.
Okay.
It's 195 multiple choice.
Wow.
But so far we've had 100% pass rate.
Awesome.
So looking forward to that in the next couple of weeks of continuing that. We'll see. But
Right.
it's really in depth. So but I feel pretty confident in what they've retained.
You took some students to the Skills USA competition. That's kind of a career and technical ed consortium. Skills USA is, and I'm probably not saying that right, but you took some students to a competition, a criminal justice pathway competition within Skills USA. You guys did fairly well, or really well.
Right. So we were a little nervous because we hadn't been there, didn't know what to expect. And the students that I took were underclassmen. They haven't had criminal investigations yet, so we had to put in a little bit of work after school and get them up to speed on that. They did well. They did really well. They placed second in state.
Awesome.
So, you know, it was a good group that I sent, a really good group.
The students from the other schools, I know Mr. Wells, I'm going to brag on him for just a second. I know Mark Wells, the principal at John Hardin, does such a good job of the family culture. And so I would imagine those students that come here from John Hardin or from North Hardin and Central Hardin probably feel not only in this pathway, but part of the John Hardin culture as well.
Correct. They're not going to a separate school. They come to a rival school, and there's a lot. I just might as well become a Bulldog, or
Right.
or the ones that are younger, are like, hey, I'm just going to transfer to John Hardin next year. Your school's cool. I mean, they really like our school.
Right.
Yeah, he does a really good job with that.
Right, absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk with a couple of your students and just get their perspective on this pathway. You're an amazing instructor. I mean, obviously, if you've got a 100% pass rate on that path.
They have a 100% pass.
Well, because of your work and their work, but you've led them down on that path. So we're going to talk to a couple students and hang out with us. We're going to talk to a couple students about this pathway. All right, we're back with Emma Sanders, who's a student at John Hardin High School, and Christian Del Rosario, who was a student at Central Hardin High School, and they are in the criminal justice pathway that is located here at John Hardin High School. But guys, and Christian, you're holding the microphone first, so we'll just ask you. So talk about when you came into this pathway, what perceptions you had, and now that you've been in the pathway, are you a senior?
Yes.
Okay, so now that you've been in the pathway for, what, 2 years?
1 year.
Okay, okay. So now that you've been in the pathway almost a year versus the reality. So your perception versus your reality, and August versus May.
Okay, so whenever I first came to this pathway, I thought it was just going to be about not really what we're actually learning about the real legal reality, but more of like news and this is really all I thought it was going to be.
The simulator.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then the reality is that we actually learn a lot about the legality of real life, and we do learn about federal laws and local laws that we have here in Kentucky, and that's really it for me.
Awesome. Well, Emma, I'll ask you the same question. Your perception, and how many years have you been in the program, in the pathway?
This is my second year.
This is your second year. So your perception versus last August to May when you'll walk across the line.
I've got to say I'm with Christian on this one. I thought it was going to be mostly just this and going over like how to be a cop and doing stuff in only the law field. And we've gone over Supreme Court cases. We've gone over investigations, and there's so much more that we've actually gone over. And I feel like I know more now about legality and normal.
Awesome.
And I just feel a lot more experienced in it.
Right. So has this made you want to seek out a profession associated with law enforcement after you graduate?
I have. I'm actually now currently thinking about being a crime scene investigator.
Awesome. So the real CSI, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about that. So what we see, and Coach Coleman and I talked about this earlier. So what you guys see on TV by watching CSI and Blue Bloods and all that other stuff probably isn't what we see in the real world, right? So how is this even? So now you know that, and you still want to go down that field. Why is that?
So I grew up watching stuff like NCIS was always my favorite show. I loved it. And Blue Bloods especially, but I've gone through this class. I recently went to CSI for state with Skills USA, and it's so much different than what I actually thought it was going to be. I personally did finger printing, and I mean that was just so much harder, but I enjoy how much differently it is than what I thought it was actually going to be. And I'd like to pursue it because I did have a lot of fun at it.
Awesome. All right. Well, Christian, what are your plans hold? I mean, do you want to pursue something in this career pathway?
Yes, I would like to be a criminal defense lawyer eventually.
Okay. Which
I've learned a lot about in this class more than anywhere else, any TV show that I've watched.
Sure.
And I don't really know how to explain it, but this class kind of went over everything that I think I will go over in school
Okay.
to pursue that career.
Okay. So, what were you thinking about a year ago, before entering this pathway?
A year ago, I was actually thinking about enlisting into the military,
Okay.
in the Air Force. That was my thing.
Right.
But then once I got into this class, I saw how much it interested me and how different it could be.
Mhm.
So that really caught my eye and my mind. So now I'm set on that.
Sure. Talk about some of the discussions you guys have. Coach Coleman talked about, you sharing your different viewpoints, listening to different speakers. She put scenarios in front of you guys. Talk about some of those discussions that you all have.
A discussion that we just recently had yesterday, we had a guest speaker. We had two, but the first one was a motivational speaker who had recently been convicted of a crime.
Okay.
Not too recently, but
Sure.
But then when he talked about the correction system and what it was like for him going through it, my mind was going everywhere because there were so many things that were happening to people around him in prison that I knew a lawyer like me in the future
Right.
could help that person out with
Right.
and resolve that issue.
Awesome. So your mind's already thinking about the hymns of the world, the people that are in those scenarios.
Yes.
Your client base.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So Emma, what are your take on some of the conversations that you guys have?
I'm a very political person in general. So
Okay.
when we come in here and show our opinions and voice our opinions and let each other just talk, and we don't interrupt each other in this class. We just kind of
Respect.
do our
You
thing. We
respect
respect
each
each other.
That's awesome.
And we get through the class and we tell each other what we think. And I feel like that's a super, super deep part of this class.
Right.
And at the end of it, it didn't matter what other people thought. We all just kind of liked each other.
Right. You walked away and you still like each
Yeah.
other. That's great. Isn't that the way the world's supposed to work? So, Christian is a central student. North Hardin students are in this class. John Hardin students are in this class. And so, it really, you guys kind of take the navy blue, the Columbia blue, and the red off when you come in here. I mean, you're just students, right? Talk about that.
I've made actually a couple of really, really good friends through this class, and have kept in contact with some of the people that I haven't had a class with in this field since freshman year.
Okay.
And I do enjoy all the people in here. We'd come in here and we all enjoy just each other's time.
Right.
And talking to each other, going through legalities of things, and it's just
Right.
perfect.
So, Ms. Coleman and Coach Coleman talked about real life scenarios, putting real life scenarios in front of you guys. Each of you had talked about just a little, maybe a little ticket or somewhere along the way, or a little stop somewhere along the way. So, and I don't mean to embarrass you, but knowing what you know from this pathway, did that kind of help you through those scenarios? I mean, that
Yes.
that gave you some pointers. Talk about that.
I drive a pickup,
Right.
and I just have a bed seat.
Right.
But I didn't know before this that they couldn't actually check the bed of my truck if
Okay.
I had it in a sealed thing.
Okay.
And I'm not saying I'm keeping anything back there that
Right.
I'm not supposed to, but
Right.
it does make me feel safer that I do have things that they can't go through if I did end up getting stopped.
Sure,
and pulled over.
sure. Well, so Christian, talk about the experiences that you've had and how those are going to help you, or how this pathway has helped you kind of get through those, and how it will help you become a criminal defense attorney.
So the time I have been pulled over,
Right.
the first time it was for, I didn't have any lights on my car, and it
Okay.
was dark outside.
Right.
And what I've learned through this class is that the more compliant you are with the officer, he
Yes.
has that discretion on whether or not he wants to write you a citation or just let you go on your way.
Mhm.
So I was as compliant as can be. I was all manners.
That's
and
right.
he let me go on my way, and it was good.
Right. So being a nice person does really make an impact.
Yes.
So when you look back at this experience, and I know it's hard to say now because there's so much water that will go under your bridge in your life in the next 5 years, 10 years. When you look back at this and knowing what your career goals are, how appreciative will you be that you had the opportunity to experience this criminal justice pathway in our school district?
I personally would be very appreciative of it because it would help me so much to what I want to do. I know that they have criminal justice classes like
in college.
Yes, in college that count as real credits. And those will help because I feel like what they're going to teach is what I've already learned, just more in depth.
Okay, and Emma, kind of same question. I bet you feel like probably you'll have a leg up on your peers, when you sit in those courses in college.
I do. I feel that since I've already been through this class, I already know so much about criminal justice in general, and any classes that I do take in the future, I'm already going to be ahead of everybody else because of that, because I have had Coach Coleman for my teacher.
Mm-hmm. To talk about her, she is a very even keel person. Maybe not on the basketball court, just joking. But she's very even keel, and that probably rubs off on you guys. Kind of helps set the tone for those respectful discussions that you all have. Talk about that.
I feel like any time we've ever kind of gotten out of line, because of course it's going to happen if you do have split decisions and opinions on things, I feel like she's really set the example of keeping respect with everybody and keeping us in line in that part, while also maintaining that respect part to her.
Right. What's your favorite part of this pathway? It's okay.
My favorite part has been going over state Supreme Court cases, because I do a local thing called teen court, and I'm a prosecutor for it, and I feel like it's really helped through getting through that, just being able to look at the past history of court cases.
Cool. Christian, what's your favorite part of the pathway been, or the courses that you've taken?
My favorite part is the simulator, just because it's fun.
Right.
And instead of sitting there at a desk talking about the Fourth Amendment, I get to get up and have fun.
Right. But this is not what you're going to do. I mean,
I know.
Right. But it's still, that's that diversity that this course can bring to you.
Yes.
So awesome. So Christian, talk about our friends here who are kind of tall and scary, but talk about what you guys use these mannequins for.
Our mannequins are for our crime scenes that we set up down here, usually in this area.
Okay.
And what we do is we come examine the crime scene, look at everything, and then write a report on it. And our police reports they're graded, and we have to be very, very thorough with them and write them correctly towards our crime scene.
So the community people that come in, the law enforcement officers that come in and talk to you, probably with their perspective, probably helps you do that task, right?
Yes, we've learned a lot about reporting, and some of our guest speakers have gone over it too, as well as all the other basics, use of force, all of that.
Cool. Well, guys, thank you for taking time out of your day and visiting with us. As you can tell, this pathway has really opened the door for a lot of students, and we're truly excited that our students can have this opportunity, just part of the 40 career pathways that are available to our students here in Hardin County Schools. We appreciate Coach Coleman. We thank Christian and Emma for hanging out with us, and we hope you join us next time for another edition of HCS Matters.